Intelligence Officer Raoul noted with interest the rapid progression of the species on CRX-4. To go from undetectable at a distance to an orbital communications relay network in only 500 years suggests a remarkably high innovation score, he commented. Admiral Krasuk, standing beside him, flicked an ear tuft and nodded in agreement. The less we give them to reverse engineer, the less will bleed, the Admiral said with a hint of concern in his voice. Are there any other warning flags, he asked, turning his attention back to Raoul. The intelligence officer shook his head. No, sir. They launch their satellites with chemical rockets. Even first-generation countergrav is more cost-effective, so we can reasonably assume they don't have it. Since you can't do FTLRD on a planet's surface without destroying it, no countergrav means no FTL. Which in turn means no reinforcements, Raoul explained. A separatist colony would have retained enough technology for an outward-facing system defense network, while a penal colony would have an inward-facing one. However, the lack of either suggests this must be their species' home world. The Admiral paused, pondering the implications. Has there been any change in the habitability report since the original survey, he asked. CRX-4, a planet that sat right in the sweet spot of the habitability assessment, boasted vast land masses in subtropical zones, with enough temperate and Arctic real estate to ensure that over 90% of galactic species could live there comfortably, needing only abdomen-grade protective clothing. Only a handful of the most extreme outlier species would require more than Class 3 environmental gear to survive somewhere on the planet. Yet, despite its allure, the remote location had kept it off the radar until now. Surprisingly little had changed, Raoul noted. They must have had their industrial revolution at a typically low population benchmark and learned how to clean up after themselves fairly quickly. Another indication of their abnormally high innovation score, he remarked. The Admiral, focused on the strategic implications, asked, "What about their physiology?" Raoul replied that their physiology wouldn't constrain their combat effectiveness as much as it would for a less innovative species, but it would still influence their tactics. He brought up visuals of the species on the display, describing them as mammalian bipeds with sparse hair, except on the top of their heads and in a few other areas. He noted moderate sexual dimorphism, subtle but enough to render co-ed sports competitions impractical for anything beyond strictly recreational purposes. Conflicting reports on strength and stamina indicated a use it or lose it physiology, while their typically high resting metabolic rates, even for endotherms, suggested that a middle-of-the-night surprise attack would need to be perfectly executed to retain the element of surprise. Precisely, the Admiral interjected, understanding the implications. Raoul continued, they are viviparous, with a gestational period of nearly a year and roughly 2 decades to maturity. Their birth rate appears to inversely correlate with wealth, which suggests a lack of innate control over their reproduction. He added that it was difficult to determine their typical lifespan due to hereditary and environmental factors that could alter it by as much as 50%. The primary suppression of their life expectancy seemed to come from a tendency toward extreme recklessness, particularly in their adolescent males. This trait, the Admiral noted, would make ground combat interesting. He decided to instruct the training officers to put their most creative minds on designing practical scenarios for the ground units. With a combination of innovation and recklessness, Captain Hussein suggested putting the truly diabolical minds on the air unit training scenarios, his reptilian muzzle parting in a grin of malicious glee. Admiral Krasuk recognized the need for caution, especially given the unpredictability of the species. The conversation shifted to the humans' capabilities, particularly their attempts at faster-than-light research. Raoul assured the Admiral that such research was noisy enough to be detected long before they managed to weaponize it. Though the humans had vision reactors providing some of their power, there was no evidence that they had tried to weaponize the technology, as there were no fallout scars from testing. Raoul recommended seizing their nuclear power plants and fuel processing facilities as quickly as possible. The Admiral agreed, noting the importance of limiting the humans' technological capabilities. As the fleet approached the planet, Admiral Krasuk decided they would remain in stealth mode until they were in position to take out all of the human satellites simultaneously. Their ground-based sensors should be sufficient for them to realize the WHNN's orbital superiority. If that wasn't enough to force their surrender, it would be Captain Hussein's turn to call the shots. The Admiral inquired if they knew what the humans called themselves and their planet, to which Raoul replied, they call themselves humans, and the planet they call Ferrari. Oddly, it's the same in all 12 of their languages, possibly inherited from some archaic language no longer in use. The initial attack on Ferrari went off perfectly, with all of the satellites disintegrating within seconds of one another. The humans, realizing their satellite communications were down, began evacuating civilians toward massive underground bunkers. The WHN ship's communication officer reported an unusually powerful communications laser from the humans, which was likely a weapon test modulated to carry data. Captain Hussein predicted that if the humans retaliated, they would assume their weapons were strong enough to damage WHN ships. Raoul recommended politely asking the humans to dial back the power on the laser, implying that the signal degradation was due to overexposure rather than a genuine threat. Negotiations with the humans began after some adjustments to the laser's signal strength, and a human named President Chen appeared on the display. He represented the Faction Arbitration Council and suggested that since the WHN was asking for surrender rather than simply glassing the planet, they must want it intact. Chen pointed out that taking the planet would require negotiating with each faction separately, as none had the authority to order a global stand-down. He noted that half of the factions would likely see the WHN as thieves and bullies due to the initial attack on infrastructure. Chen's final message was clear: if you want this planet, you're going to have to come down here and take it. In response to Admiral Krasuk's question about salting the Ferrari, President Chen clarified that the phrase was unfamiliar to him, but he understood it to mean salting the Earth. The Admiral, realizing the misunderstanding, explained that every terrestrial species calls their planet some cognate of fertile soil or solid ground. The exchange revealed the humans' growing realization of the WHN's potential for destruction and their commitment to preventing an all-out atrocity contest. President Chen assured that as long as the WHN refrained from targeting civilians and using biological or chemical weapons, most of their factions would remain within acceptable parameters of warfare. Captain Hussein's interest in the humans' opinions on eating their kills revealed a cultural divide. President Chen explained that while cannibalism and extremise might be overlooked, ritual practice was not tolerated, and any trophy taking would need to be justifiable as preserving DNA samples for post-war identification. This exchange underscored the complexities of negotiating with a species as innovative and reckless as the humans. As the conversation continued, the WHN leadership realized they were dealing with a civilization that had managed to hide critical information about their capabilities, including the true nature of their portal network. The WHN leadership debated the implications of the humans' advanced technology and their ability to reverse engineer countergravity tech. Raoul suggested that the humans likely sent anyone with critical knowledge off-world during the first wave of evacuations, making it difficult to predict their next move. Captain Hussein, however, saw this as an opportunity to explore the humans' defenses by cracking open one of their bunkers. Just as the plan was set in motion, the bunkers exploded, sending a volley of colonial projectiles into space, each propelled by a hybrid of chemical rockets and countergravity tech. As the WHN ship's point defense sensors detected shielded missiles, Captain Hussein ordered all personnel to stand by to repel boarders. The realization that the humans had projectiles capable of withstanding such acceleration and surviving to fight afterward sent a wave of anxiety through the fleet. Admiral Krasuk, watching the missiles' progress, recognized the nightmare scenario they faced: a determined, innovative, and reckless enemy with the potential to turn the tide of battle. When the boarding missiles finally impacted the WHN ships, the humans revealed their strategic prowess by activating an assimilation boarding protocol, threatening the WHN with self-destruct if they attempted any further breach. The WHN found themselves negotiating from a position of weakness, agreeing to withdraw to the fringes of the system and allowing the humans to reclaim their personnel. The ceasefire terms were reluctantly accepted, with the WHN ground troops ordered to return to fortified positions as long as they remained unchallenged. The uneasy truce highlighted the humans' ability to adapt and resist, even against a technologically superior foe. As the situation de-escalated, both sides began the delicate process of negotiating a more permanent resolution, with the WHN conceding to convert one of their bases on Ferrari into an embassy. In the aftermath of the ceasefire, President Chen and Admiral Krasuk found themselves in a tentative dialogue, exploring the potential for a lasting peace. President Chen, representing a complex and decentralized political structure, explained the challenges of negotiating with multiple sovereign factions on the planet. Voice-Leveliana, a representative of the WHN Council, arrived to extend formal diplomatic recognition, but found herself grappling with the intricacies of human politics. The conversation revealed the humans' resilience and adaptability, qualities that had allowed them to survive and thrive despite the odds stacked against them. As the dialogue continued, the WHN leadership reflected on the lessons learned from the conflict. The humans had proven themselves to be formidable opponents, capable of outmaneuvering and outthinking their adversaries. Admiral Krasuk, newly granted the title of Wing Lord, acknowledged the narrow escape from disaster, crediting his subordinates for their quick thinking and adaptability. Voice Laveliana emphasized the importance of flexibility and innovation in leadership, qualities that Krasuk had demonstrated in abundance. The WHN, recognizing the potential for future conflicts with similarly innovative species, began to reassess their strategies and protocols. President Chen, aware of the WHN's internal politics and the challenges of maintaining peace, offered insights into the humans' approach to governance and diplomacy. The conversation touched on the broader implications of the conflict, including the potential for future alliances or rivalries. As the negotiations continued, both sides recognized the need for mutual respect and understanding in navigating the complex landscape of interstellar relations. The story of Ferrari served as a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations must remain vigilant in the face of unexpected challenges, and that innovation and adaptability are the keys to survival in a rapidly changing galaxy. As the negotiations wore on, it became clear that the WHN had underestimated the humans' ability to resist. Admiral Krasuk, now Wing Lord, reflected on the irony of the situation. The humans, a species they had initially considered primitive and easy to conquer, had turned out to be one of the most resilient and strategically adept opponents they had ever faced. The WHN's initial confidence had been shattered, replaced by a cautious respect for their adversaries. The humans' refusal to surrender, coupled with their ability to adapt to the WHN's tactics, had forced Krasuk to reconsider the entire campaign. He realized that this was not just a battle for a single planet, but a test of the WHN's ability to adapt to an unpredictable and rapidly evolving enemy. Meanwhile, on the human side, President Chen and his advisors were fully aware of the delicate balance they had to maintain. They knew that the WHN, despite their recent setbacks, still possessed overwhelming technological superiority. The humans' only advantage was their ability to think creatively and exploit the WHN's rigid adherence to protocol. Chen's strategy was to keep the WHN off balance, forcing them to react to human initiatives, rather than allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement. This approach had worked so far, but Chen knew that it was only a matter of time before the WHN adapted to their tactics. The key to survival would be to keep pushing the envelope, finding new ways to challenge the WHN's assumptions and disrupt their plans. The humans' resilience was further demonstrated when they began to launch counterattacks against the WHN's ground positions. These were not conventional military assaults, but rather a series of hit-and-run raids designed to harass and demoralize the WHN forces. The humans used their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage, striking quickly and then disappearing before the WHN could mount a coordinated response. These tactics, while not decisive in themselves, served to keep the WHN on edge and prevented them from consolidating their hold on the planet. Krasuk, watching these developments with growing concern, realized that the humans were playing a long game, one that the WHN might not be prepared to win. As the days turned into weeks, the conflict on Ferrari began to take on a new character. The initial clarity of the WHN's objectives had given way to a murky, protracted struggle, where the lines between victory and defeat became increasingly blurred. The WHN had expected a swift and decisive campaign, but instead found themselves bogged down in a war of attrition against an enemy that refused to play by the rules. This was a type of warfare that the WHN was not accustomed to, and their frustration began to show. Krasuk, now responsible for navigating this quagmire, found himself constantly reevaluating his strategies, searching for a way to bring the conflict to a successful conclusion without further loss of life and resources. In the midst of this turmoil, Voice Laveliana worked tirelessly to keep the lines of communication open between the WHN and the humans. She understood that the longer the conflict dragged on, the greater the risk of it spiraling out of control. Her goal was to broker a peace that would allow both sides to save face and avoid further bloodshed. But this was no easy task. The humans were understandably wary of WHN intentions, and many within the WHN itself were reluctant to admit that a peaceful resolution might be the best option. Laveliana knew that time was running out, and that the window for a negotiated settlement was rapidly closing. President Chen, for his part, continued to play a delicate balancing act. He had to maintain the unity of the various factions on Ferrari, all of whom had their own agendas and priorities. At the same time, he had to keep the WHN at bay, preventing them from gaining the upper hand in the negotiations. Chen's ultimate goal was to secure a lasting peace, but he was also aware that any sign of weakness could embolden the WHN to resume their offensive. It was a tightrope walk, and one misstep could spell disaster for the entire planet. The stakes were high, and the pressure was mounting on both sides to find a way out of the impasse. As the negotiations reached a critical juncture, both sides began to explore the possibility of a compromise. The WHN, having learned the hard way that the humans were not to be underestimated, were now more willing to consider terms that would allow them to withdraw without losing face. For the humans, the priority was to secure their autonomy and ensure that their planet would not be occupied or exploited by the WHN. The idea of establishing a joint WHN human embassy on Ferrari was floated as a potential solution, providing a framework for future cooperation and preventing further hostilities. While neither side was entirely satisfied with this outcome, it offered a way to end the conflict without further bloodshed. However, not everyone was on board with the idea of a peaceful resolution. Within both the WHN and the human factions, there were those who believed that the war should continue until one side was decisively defeated. These hardliners saw any compromise as a betrayal of their cause, and they worked behind the scenes to sabotage the negotiations. On the WHN side, some military officers argued that withdrawing from Ferrari would set a dangerous precedent, emboldening other species to resist WHN authority. Among the humans, certain factions viewed the WHN as an existential threat that could not be appeased, and they called for an all-out effort to drive the invaders off the planet once and for all. The tension between these competing factions came to a head when a group of WHN officers attempted to launch a covert operation to take control of the human bunkers by force. The plan was discovered at the last minute, and the resulting scandal nearly derailed the entire peace process. President Chen, seizing the opportunity, used the incident to rally support for the negotiations, arguing that the only way to prevent further bloodshed was to reach an agreement that both sides could live with. Voice-Leveliana, recognizing the danger posed by the hardliners on both sides, redoubled her efforts to keep the negotiations on track. In the end, it was the pragmatists who prevailed. The peace agreement that was finally reached allowed the WHN to withdraw with their dignity intact, while the humans retained control over Ferrari. The joint embassy was established, providing a forum for ongoing dialogue and cooperation between the two species. While the agreement was far from perfect, it represented a significant achievement in a conflict that could easily have spiraled out of control. Both sides knew that the peace was fragile and that it would require constant vigilance to maintain. But for now, at least, the fighting was over, and the people of Ferrari could begin the process of rebuilding their lives. As the WHN fleet departed, Admiral Krasuk reflected on the lessons of the campaign. The humans had proven to be a formidable opponent, not because of their technological prowess, but because of their ability to think creatively and adapt to changing circumstances. It was a humbling experience for the WHN, one that would force them to rethink their approach to future conflicts. Krasuk knew that he had been fortunate to survive the campaign with his reputation intact, and he vowed to use the lessons he had learned to better prepare the WHN for the challenges that lay ahead. The war on Ferrari had been a wake-up call, and the WHN would not soon forget it. For the humans, the end of the war marked the beginning of a new era. They had successfully defended their home planet against a powerful and technologically advanced foe, and in doing so had proven to themselves and the rest of the galaxy that they were a force to be reckoned with. The experience had forged a new sense of unity among the factions on Ferrari as they realized that their survival depended on their ability to work together. President Chen, hailed as a hero for his leadership during the crisis, emphasized the importance of remaining vigilant and prepared for future threats. The war had shown that while technology and firepower were important, it was innovation, adaptability, and the will to survive that ultimately determined the outcome. As Ferrari returned to a semblance of normalcy, the people began to rebuild their lives. But the scars of war were not easily forgotten. The bunkers that had once been filled with civilians during the WHN's initial attack were now monuments to the resilience and determination of the human spirit. The joint embassy, established as part of the peace agreement, became a symbol of hope for a future where different species could coexist and cooperate, rather than resorting to violence and conquest. The lessons of the conflict were clear: peace, while difficult to achieve, was far preferable to the horrors of war. In the years that followed, the relationship between the WHN and the humans evolved from one of mutual suspicion to a cautious partnership. The joint embassy on Ferrari became a center for cultural exchange and diplomatic dialogue, as both sides sought to learn from each other and avoid the mistakes of the past. While there were still tensions and disagreements, the experience of the war had taught both sides the value of cooperation and the dangers of underestimating one's opponent. For the WHN, the campaign on Ferrari was a reminder that even the most advanced technology could not guarantee victory if it was not accompanied by strategic flexibility and an understanding of one's adversaries. President Chen, reflecting on the events of the war and its aftermath, knew that the peace they had achieved was tenuous and would require constant effort to maintain. He was acutely aware that the galaxy was full of other potential threats, and that the lessons learned on Ferrari would need to be applied in future conflicts. But for now, at least, they had bought themselves some time to rebuild, to strengthen their defenses, and to prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. The people of Ferrari had shown that they were capable of facing down even the most formidable foes, and that they would continue to do so, no matter what the future might bring. As the dust settled on Ferrari, the planet's leaders began to look toward the future with cautious optimism. The scars of the war were still fresh, but the resilience of the human spirit shone through. The factions that once squabbled over resources and borders now found themselves united by a shared experience of survival against a common enemy. This newfound unity was fragile, but it offered a glimmer of hope for lasting peace on the planet. President Chen, aware of the delicate balance, took on the role of mediator, guiding the factions through the difficult process of rebuilding and reconciliation. He knew that the challenges ahead would be significant, but he was determined to ensure that the sacrifices made during the war would not be in vain. Meanwhile, the WHN, licking their wounds from the unexpected turn of events on Ferrari, began a period of intense introspection. The campaign had exposed weaknesses in their strategy and their over-reliance on technological superiority. The WHN Council convened a series of meetings to analyze what had gone wrong and to prevent such a costly miscalculation from happening again. Admiral Krasuk, now Winglord, was at the center of these discussions. His experience on Ferrari had made him a key figure in shaping the WHN's future military doctrine. He argued for a more flexible approach, one that emphasized adaptability and the importance of understanding the cultures and capabilities of their adversaries. The joint embassy on Ferrari became a focal point for this new approach. It served not only as a symbol of the peace between the WHN and the humans, but also as a hub for the exchange of ideas and knowledge. WHN diplomats and scientists worked alongside their human counterparts to explore areas of mutual interest, from technology to culture. This collaboration helped to build trust between the two species, slowly eroding the animosities that had once threatened to reignite the conflict. The embassy also became a place where disputes between the factions on Ferrari could be resolved peacefully, with the WHN playing the role of a neutral arbitrator. This new dynamic marked a significant shift in the WHN's role in the galaxy, from conquerors to peacekeepers. However, the peace was not without its challenges. Some factions on Ferrari remained deeply suspicious of the WHN, viewing the embassy as a symbol of occupation rather than cooperation. These groups, though small, were vocal and occasionally disruptive, staging protests and even attempting to sabotage the embassy's operations. President Chen, ever the pragmatist, worked tirelessly to address these concerns, offering reassurances and seeking compromises that would keep the peace. He knew that the road to lasting stability would be long and fraught with difficulties, but he was committed to guiding his people through it. The presence of the WHN, while a source of tension, also served as a reminder of the high stakes involved in maintaining the fragile balance. As the months turned into years, the relationship between Ferrari and the WHN continued to evolve. The initial weariness gave way to a cautious optimism as both sides began to see the benefits of their partnership. Joint research initiatives led to technological advancements that neither side could have achieved alone. These breakthroughs, in turn, helped to improve the quality of life on Ferrari, from more efficient energy production to advanced medical treatments. The WHN, for their part, gained valuable insights into the human way of thinking, which would inform their interactions with other species in the future. The embassy became a beacon of what could be achieved when former enemies chose to work together, rather than remain locked in conflict. Despite these positive developments, there were still those who questioned the long-term viability of the peace. Some within the WHN military were concerned that the lessons of Ferrari would be forgotten over time, leading to a return to the old ways of thinking. They feared that the emphasis on diplomacy and cooperation might weaken the WHN's ability to defend itself in future conflicts. To address these concerns, Winglord Krasuk implemented a series of reforms designed to strike a balance between military readiness and diplomatic engagement. These reforms included enhanced training programs that incorporated lessons from the Ferrari campaign, as well as increased cooperation with the diplomatic corps to ensure that military actions were always aligned with broader strategic goals. On Ferrari, the process of rebuilding continued. The war had left deep scars, both physical and emotional, but it had also forged a new sense of identity among the planet's inhabitants. The factions, once fiercely independent, now saw themselves as part of a larger whole, united by their shared experience of surviving the WHN invasion. This sense of unity was reflected in the new political structures that began to take shape, with President Chen at the helm. Under his leadership, Ferrari moved toward a more integrated and cooperative system of governance, one that emphasized collaboration and mutual support over competition and conflict. It was a delicate balancing act, but one that offered the promise of a brighter future for all. As the years passed, the events on Ferrari became a case study in the WHN's military academies. Cadets were taught not only the tactical and strategic lessons of the campaign, but also the broader implications of the conflict. They learned about the importance of understanding one's enemy, the value of flexibility in command, and the dangers of underestimating an opponent. These lessons were reinforced by visits to the joint embassy on Ferrari, where they could see firsthand the ongoing efforts to build a lasting peace. For many, the experience was eye-opening, challenging their preconceived notions about power and the nature of conflict. The story of Ferrari became a touchstone for a new generation of WHN leaders, who were determined to avoid the mistakes of the past. The legacy of the Ferrari campaign also extended beyond the WHN and the humans. Other species in the galaxy took note of what had happened and began to reassess their own relationships with the WHN. Some, emboldened by the human success, started to push back against WHN influence, seeking greater autonomy and independence. Others saw the potential for collaboration and began to explore ways to engage with the WHN on more equal terms. The WHN, for their part, recognized that their approach to interstellar relations needed to evolve. The old model of conquest and domination was no longer tenable in a galaxy that was becoming increasingly interconnected and interdependent. President Chen, reflecting on the broader implications of the Ferrari campaign, understood that the galaxy was at a crossroads. The peace they had achieved on Ferrari was fragile, but it held the promise of something greater. If they could build on this foundation, they could help to create a new era of cooperation and mutual respect among the species of the galaxy. But if they failed, the consequences could be dire. Chen knew that the future was uncertain, but he was determined to do everything in his power to steer it toward a more peaceful and prosperous path. The story of Ferrari was far from over, and its final chapter had yet to be written. As Ferrari continued to heal and grow, the lessons of the conflict became deeply ingrained in the planet's culture. The stories of the brave men and women who had fought to defend their home, as well as those who had worked tirelessly to build the peace, were passed down to future generations. These stories served as a reminder of what could be achieved when people came together in the face of adversity. They also served as a warning of the dangers of complacency and the importance of remaining vigilant in the face of new challenges. The people of Ferrari knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to face it with the same determination and resilience that had seen them through the darkest days of the war. In the end, the legacy of Ferrari was one of hope. The war had been brutal and costly, but it had also revealed the potential for a brighter future. The people of Ferrari had shown that they were capable of not only surviving but thriving in the face of overwhelming odds. They had built a new society, one that was stronger and more united than ever before. And in doing so, they had laid the groundwork for a new era of peace and cooperation in the galaxy. The story of Ferrari was a testament to the power of the human spirit and the potential for even the most unlikely of allies to find common ground. It was a story that would continue to inspire generations to come. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.